Well, hello, kids. So, like I said, today we're going to finish up or get as much done as we can. I'm not going to keep you more than 20 minutes. So that way, if we don't finish it right here with this recording, then we'll finish it in class tomorrow before we do the little in class project that we're going to do with the Confederation Congress with the Articles of Confederation. So, get your notes out, make sure you got those going, and we're going to continue where we left off. So some classes got to the Native Americans, some of them didn't. Just to reiterate, life after the Revolutionary War was causing a lot of change in the United States, newly formed United States. We talked about slavery and how it kind of changed. Native Americans, um, they allied mostly with the British during the Revolutionary War, and so there was a lot of resentment there from people who were citizens of the United States against the Native Americans. But there were some people that thought that Native Americans were somewhat redeemable or were people that could be brought into what the United States culture was and act the way that other settlers were acting, European settlers, or mostly from England. But like Thomas Jefferson, he refers to the Native Americans as the redeemable, noble savage, that they had good qualities, that they were people that had good character and were just like white Europeans. And so as a result, he was hoping that they could be assimilated into white culture in the United States. That's where a minority group forgets and stops practicing everything about who they are, the way they look, the way they talk, their religion, things like that, and then take on the majority's culture and look at them and start acting it as them. So there was division on how to act, whether this Native American tribe or that Native American tribe would decide on whether or not they were going to become civilized. And so there were 5 tribes in the South that did this voluntarily on their own and started living. They dressed like white people, they were Christians, they farmed, they bought land, and for a long time they weren't bothered, but eventually things don't really work out for them. After the Revolutionary War, just like after the French and Indian War with Chief Pontiac, um, Native Americans banded together. This is a picture of a guy named Chief Little Turtle, and he combined a bunch of Native American tribes to continue to fight against the United States. They lost out in 1794 at what's called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, and they were forced to sign the Treaty of Greenville, which gave away millions of acres of Native American land to the U.S. government. Women, they were looking at different roles in this country. During the war, they managed farms and they were used as spies. There were some women called camp followers that wherever the army traveled, they traveled to be able to do cooking and laundry and nursing and as far as being nurses and things like that. And in that situation, sometimes they were stuck in the middle of combat. And so um, this is a picture of a lady named Deborah Sampson. She was a woman that disguised herself as a man and fought. It's kind of a Mulan thing going there, and fought during the Revolutionary War. And so that was something that was not common, but it did happen. Women also, because of this fight for freedom and recognition and being able to have political power and popular sovereignty and all this stuff, many women began demanding the right to vote. Many women use the same tagline. Women feel like, hey, we're being taxed in this current government and we're not being allowed the opportunity to vote. So we are being taxed without representation. And they began to still use that tagline, even into the US government, demanding the right to vote. One of the big things that women were really looked upon to do is what's referred to as Republican motherhood. This is the idea that women are responsible or take on the responsibility of when they have children, then raising these children and teaching them how to be good citizens in this country that we have, teaching them how the government works, teaching them about the Constitution, their civic duty, what civic virtue is, and then how to do that in the society. so that way they can contribute to the system, know how the system works. And that's a big role that mothers were asked to take on. And so that was that republic, the idea of Republican motherhood was something that women were responsible for doing. In the economy after the war, how people bought and sold things and made money, there was lots of land available. We were moving westward. We got that big chunk of land from Great Britain that had been shut down to us after the French and Indian War. And as a result, people were expanding westward and looking for opportunities to do that. We talked about how the aristocracy, many of them lost their land, and so that was available to people. Lots of cheap land available. Manufacturing increased. We started to make things because before we depended on Great Britain for making us stuff and manufacturing goods, and we were starting to do it ourselves. It will take a long time before it really kicks off. It won't be until really the War of 1812 where that starts to happen, because we stick pretty much with agriculture, and that's our big moneymaker. That's what we know, and that's what we do for a long time. There were new markets, meaning that we no longer just had to trade with Great Britain, and we no longer were restricted in who we could trade with. And it was good because we had new options to be able to trade, but it's bad because now we've got to compete with other countries. And so we no longer have that guaranteed market to sell stuff when it comes to Great Britain. And so we struggle. We struggle for some time in being able to do that and remain primarily raw material producers for a long time. One of the things we had is also massive war debt. Each state had their own war debt, and then also the federal government had war debt. And as a result of this, the question was, how do we get rid of this debt? How do we pay it back? And then the problem we also had was Great Britain now is because we're not at war with them, they're dumping, and we don't have any kind of trade agreements that have been created. So they're dumping all of their stockpiled, cheaply made, manufactured goods in the United States, and we can't even compete. And so the question is, should we even compete, or should we just remain raw material producers? If that's the case, we'll never know what our economic potential is. Another idea that starts becoming a big part of the identity of the United States is the idea that power derives from the people. That's the idea of popular sovereignty. We will talk about that again. Also, elected representation, being able to elect people who represent you in the government. Okay, this is all what is referred to as republicanism, the creation of a republic and then participating in that republic by electing people. So ultimately, because we pick the people, the power derives from the people. Okay, that's the idea of popular sovereignty. And also in that, there is a responsibility for the citizens in that country to practice what is called civic virtue. It's the idea that you are committed to your country, you're committed to the ideas that govern your country, and you will have to act unselfishly, and in some ways, you will have to sacrifice in order to be able to give to that system. Whether it's service that you provide, whether it's military or government or whatever it is. That's the idea of civic virtue, meaning your willingness to serve, your willingness to contribute to the system. A big part of that is the idea of being an independent property holder, that people who have their own property and their success depends on their work and their effort with their property. That is a big part of being virtuous as far as they were concerned and acting the way you should, because then you will contribute to the system that then protects your property, and you will do what you need to do to make sure that this system runs well and the government is honest and does the things that it's supposed to do. So that's the idea of republicanism. So each state had their own government. We talked about that before. And since we no longer had Great Britain governing us and we didn't have the laws of Great Britain governing us, that meant the states needed to start creating their own governments. This is a little bit different from their colonial assemblies. There is no involvement from Great Britain anymore, okay? And so states had been writing their own constitutions since the war had begun and since we had declared independence or were prepared to declare independence. So if you remember in that John Adams video we watched, Thomas Jefferson said, I can't possibly write the Constitution because I can't write the Declaration of Independence because I'm currently helping to write the new Constitution for the state of Virginia. And so he did find time, obviously, to be able to do that. But a constitution is a generic term when it's talking about a document that states the rules under which a government will operate, how you vote, how people are elected, what positions in the government there are, what their responsibilities in that government are, what the powers are that they have in that government. And so states knew that they wanted to make a government for their state and a constitution that outlined what their government was going to look like. And they wanted the government's power to be limited, to make maximum opportunities for people to choose for themselves what they want to do. And so the power was going to be ultimately in a state legislature. Some of them really hated the idea of having an executive, like a governor or something, that would have position of power. And so they said, ultimately, we should have a legislator, and most power should reside in that legislature because that represents the people and it's picked by the people. And so that's what they stuck with. Some states didn't even have a governor. All power resided in the state legislature. So the question is all of this going to work? If you look at this little political cartoon here in the corner, you see the United States is in a boat, and it says Articles of Confederation there on the bottom of the boat. That's what the government was being operated under, the system that the government operated under as a country. And you got all the states in there, and they're on the River of Independence. But if things don't go well and this doesn't work out, they're going to very quickly go over that waterfall, and at the bottom of the waterfall is anarchy, chaos. Okay. Also on that front, states wanted to make sure that in their state constitutions that they protected individual people's rights. Stuff that was included in the Declaration of Independence, stuff that has been basically accepted widely as what the rights of the people are. For example, freedom of the press. If you're accused of a crime, you have a trial by jury to determine if you're guilty or not. And if you are found guilty, then there can't be cruel and unusual punishments. The punishment needs to fit the crime. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, those kinds of things. The states individually created, along with their state constitution, a Bill of Rights. This lists what the citizens of that state have rights to do. And it's not an all-inclusive list, but it makes sure to protect at least their basic rights. Okay? Now remember that whole idea of a Bill of Rights attached to a constitution that sets up a government, because that's going to come up later. So the Articles of Confederation, in the article that you guys read yesterday and the questions that you answered on the Read, Pair, Share paper that we used or we did in class, this is the government, the first governing document that created a government in the United States. Okay? Once we declared independence, the thought is we need something. Each state has their own state government, but we need a government that's going to be over all the states in some ways in order to make us United States. And that was created by the Confederation Congress, or excuse me, the Continental Congress, and they created these Articles of Confederation. It's a document that lists what the federal or central government that's over the states is going to look like. And so it was passed by the Second Continental Congress, and we're going to talk here in a little bit about what's in it and what the federal government has the right to do, and then likewise what the state governments have the right to do. It was passed on November 15th of 1777, not long after we declared independence, but it will not officially be approved by all the states and be the official government of the states until March of 1781. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, almost 3.5 years that it took to be able to ratify this and officially make it approved, and then that new government could be formed based on the Articles of Confederation. So the question is, what held things up? Why did it take almost 3.5 years for the Articles of Confederation to be officially ratified? So we'll talk about that. But in the Articles of Confederation, here's a list of the powers. Move my little thing here. Here's what the powers of the Confederation Congress were. And so this is a Congress that is over all the states. Okay? They feared a strong central power because they had suffered under a strong central power with the King of England. And so they wanted to make sure that that central government was going to be weak and that most power resided in the states. So with this, they created just a one branched Congress in this new government. And so this Confederation Congress will be one branch of government, and it will just be this Congress. Okay. It is what's called a unicameral, just one house and one group, no other branches, no executive, no judicial, just this legislative. And the legislative power they have is going to be very small. Okay. It's going to be very limited to protect just the basic rights of people. Each state in this Confederation Congress had just one vote. You could have as many delegates as you wanted, but all those delegates could only cast one vote together. Okay, so basically every state was equal, regardless of how big the state was as far as population of people that were in the state. Okay, they could settle conflicts between states. They could make money, they could borrow money, and they could make treaties with foreign countries. Okay, now here's the thing. If they wanted to borrow money from the states in order to take care of an army or to pay back the debt that we borrowed from other countries to fight the war, they could ask the states, but the states could 100% deny their requests. And so as a result, there was nothing that they could do. They just had to kind of say, all right, well, I guess we tried. Also, they could ask states for soldiers to contribute to an army to protect the country, but the states, once again, could just deny it. Now, if they were allowed to create an army by the states, then they could control that army. But the Confederation Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, was extremely weak. Okay, nothing they could do. As a result, there's going to be a problem that develops with the states. The states are going to kind of get into these arguments with each other, and there's nobody that's going to be able to settle it. Now, a Congress, a national government, a central government that's over all the states could help to settle those things, but if they've got no power to tax, if the states can deny any requests, that's going to kind of create a problem. We're not going to be very united. Now, as far as the states go, they could refuse any request by the national government, by the Confederation Congress. And states could regulate their trade however they saw fit. They could make treaties with other countries. They could trade with other states. They could put restrictions on other countries, other states. They could print their own money if they wanted to. That makes a lot of problems. If you're trying to trade in the country, it's just going to create a big issue. Okay? And also the states could make any laws they wanted to govern themselves. There was not anybody over the states that should say or could say, maybe that law is not very fair or okay. So in the relationship between our central federal government and then the state governments had pretty much all the power. So once again, why did it take so long for the states to finally approve these Articles of Confederation? Well, it comes down to Western lands. Remember all that land to the west that we just got from Great Britain? Many states claimed that they had rights to parts of that new territory. However, the ones who argued with that were the small states like Maryland, who didn't have a western border. They had no opportunity. Or like Rhode Island, they didn't have any opportunity to expand westward. It wasn't going to happen or be an option for them. Okay? And so they said, why is it fair that these states that have a western border can expand while we can't? Okay? And so it was only agreed upon, the articles were agreed upon after a compromise was reached. Good old Thomas Jefferson is the guy that is going to create this compromise. Ultimately, Jefferson is going to say no states are going to be allowed to have any of this new western land. That western land is going to be made into new states. No existing state is going to be able to grab onto a chunk of that land. Okay? When it was agreed upon that nobody was going to get this, Maryland, the final holdout on the ratification of the Articles, finally ratified the Articles in March 1781. And as a result, the Articles of Confederation became our new government, and that's what we lived under. Okay? So I haven't reached the end here, but I will reach the end when we get back to class on Wednesday, and then we're going to do our activity. See you later.